And I focus on the other negative things, you know, like the youth are kind of lost and just partying and drinking as if it's a birthright to use up finite resources on a planet to do that. I've explained recently 3 years of UK being teetotal, and the money saved as a whole can end the world hunger deficit. Which is crazy, that we use pleasure over the well-being of others. But as I focus on these things, I also don't focus on the fact that we have an ambulance service, we have fire brigade, we have paved streets, we have heating, we all have some means to acquire food. The government gives you money. Here, you can starve to death. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no one coming. Whereas if you were in that situation in England, you'd know someone was coming. But I said, well, there's nobody coming. I know there's no one coming. And it's a very frightening and lonely feeling when you realise nobody's coming. Likewise, it's a very concerning feeling when you leave a very seriously sick child in intensive care unit and a rat comes out the door. Hey guys, so one of the children is very, very sick. I rushed him to hospital last night. I haven't been to bed for, 30-something hours, feeling a bit tired. It's a boy most of you know, Johanna, who is a cerebral palsy boy. He's lived with me for 2 years now, nearly 2 years coming up. And of course, as with all the children, we love him a lot. And I'm very close with him because he's one of the first children that I found here. And there's a video on YouTube where we'd found him tied up in a shed by neglectful parents. So there's been a virus going around, and I've had a virus as well. The other children have had it. One child passed out from it. And sometimes you don't know what they are, just these flu viruses in the cold season. And I think the fact that there's no sewage system and all the rain's going into everyone's pit latrines, then it disturbs things, you know. And everyone seems to get a little bit sick and stuff goes around. And Johanna had this for a couple of days, but then this morning, early hours of this morning, I was called and he was not very responsive. Fritzy was called and he wasn't very responsive, and Fritzy came and got me, is what actually happened. So as soon as I saw him, we rushed to hospital, and he got down to taking one breath every 30 seconds. We took his blood sugar and it was 1.2. So everyone was very confused what was happening with him. We still aren't sure. His veins collapsed, so we couldn't give him insulin. I finally got the insulin in after about 9 or 10 tries, and his breathing returned to normal, and he's on constant oxygen throughout all of this ordeal. I'm so tired. Then his blood sugar dropped off again, which doesn't make any sense. He couldn't maintain it. So we don't know what's going on with his body. So I left him at pediatric ICU with Happy, our occupational therapist, who spends every day with the children. And I had to leave. There was nothing I could do but sit in the corridor, come back here and sort everything out for the other kids. Excuse me. And really what I wanted to talk about, for all I'm really tired, And listening to someone say they're tired and sounding low energy is never fun to watch, I know, but I know at least some of you will get to the end of me speaking, is that we should be really grateful. Sometimes we overlook being grateful for the way society is. Sometimes we live very romantic ideologies. I mean, I'm off the grid and I love it here, but I also love the fact that I have the ability to take the children for medical care if I need to. I love the fact that I have a nice, clean, white tiled floor instead of a muddy floor like many of the family homes have around here. I like these comforts because they help me mentally and physically. And however our society has evolved, a lot of what we have, when you don't have it, you want it again. Now, I could probably quite happily live in nature, but we're not in a society like that anymore. And I do enjoy the nicer things. And one thing I was always privileged with growing up in England was free medical care with the NHS. And at the same time, I'm not saying the fact it's free is a big thing, because in part, sometimes things that are free are not always as good as they could be. It's great that it's free. But I said after visiting a doctor in Germany that I'd much rather go to a German medical care, even if I had to pay for it, because I can see the quality of care is better. It's just the way it is. So, but I'm blessed to have had the medical care, and to it to be free, of course, is a blessing as well, even if it's not as good as other countries where you pay. And we forget about these developments. And a lot of us get caught up in the idea of, oh, this system we live in is all wrong, but we should always remember to focus on the things that are right about it and ask ourselves, would we have gotten to where we are without certain things going on? I'm standing outside the door for paediatric ICU in the local hospital here, and it's a brand new paediatric ICU section, just a room, probably about the size of the room that I'm in now, and all new equipment, etc. So it looks nice in there. And I'm standing there, and a rat comes walking toward me out of the paediatric ICU. I know this would be unheard of. This would make front page news in England if a hospital had a rat coming out of an intensive care unit. It really would. It truly would. And I think we sometimes forget to be grateful for what we've had, and I'm included in that. I'm so busy sometimes going on about the failings of the system we live in, the inequality, the injustice. Those at the top who should be held accountable, which they should. I don't retract on that. Of course they should, for the things they've done. That we forget how wonderful at the same time our society is. It's wonderful that it's safe. To some degree, of course. It's difficult to say that about the UK after that bomb, but it's difficult. It's good that it's safe in as we have an ability to call a police force, for example. We have the ability to call a fire brigade, an ambulance. Here you don't have those abilities. You know, we don't have an ambulance service here that people can have. An ambulance might take an hour or 2 hours to come because there are so few. And even then, you might have just a 4-wheel drive appear that'll load you in the back and drive you to hospital. They won't treat you. And I've, unfortunately, was the first person on the scene of an accident where a pickup truck had flipped over at some speed with around about 20 people in the back of it. 15, 20 people in the back. And I wrote a blog about this. But as I arrived and I saw all these people on the floor, I was the first one there. It happened on the road near Featherstale here. And the pickup had gone over forwards, so everyone had been catapulted onto the rocky road. So you can imagine what I walked into. And there were sights I won't describe, but sights you don't want to see. And there were people dead. It was very apparent that at least 4 people were dead immediately when I got there. That was very clear, shall we say. There was no doubting that they were dead. There were other people who I tried to help, and whilst I was helping them, I realised that they wouldn't make it due to the fact of the injuries I'd seen to their heads and stuff. And there were other men that we loaded into cars and they died when they got to the hospital. And I knew that day that if we were in the West, many of those people who I loaded into cars and died wouldn't have died because ambulances would have came and looked after them. And the care they would have got would have been superior. And I remember, I'm going to be very real in this video. I remember holding a man and the back of his head was missing, but he was still alive. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no one coming. Whereas if you were in that situation in England, you'd know someone was coming. But I said, there's nobody coming. I know there's no one coming. And it's a very frightening and lonely feeling when you realise nobody's coming. Likewise, it's a very concerning feeling when you leave a very seriously sick child in intensive care unit and a rat comes out the door. But there's a security to the infrastructure we have in the West. And I forget, when I speak about those in charge, those powers that be. And it's true, of course, the wealth does not trickle down to where it needs to get to. The resources are not used how they should be. The technology is used in the wrong way. Stagnant wealth sitting in bank accounts is just a crime unto itself. The weakness of the necessity for self-preservation instead of helping those that we see in need ahead of us. What do you say? Those persons like that, those wealthy, when they get to meet God and God says, why didn't you share what you had when I asked you to share it? Or why didn't you come to know that you should share what you had without me asking you? What will they say to God? Sorry, I kept it for a rainy day. Well, this is the main thing I find myself focusing on in the West, is the inequality. And I focus on the other negative things, like the youth are kind of lost and just partying and drinking as if it's a birthright to use up finite resources on a planet to do that. I've explained recently 3 years of UK being teetotal and the money saved as a whole can end the world hunger deficit. Which is crazy, that we use pleasure over the well-being of others. But as I focus on these things, I also don't focus on the fact that we have an ambulance service, we have fire brigade, we have paved streets, we have heating, we all have some means to acquire food. The government gives you money. Here, you can starve to death. There's no one coming in an ambulance. And you feel very isolated and you feel very vulnerable. And it's that feeling of us feeling isolated and vulnerable that is being targeted and manipulated. Because, of course, here, I would applaud if they all of a sudden became a very effective and free ambulance service. I'd applaud it and say we want more of that. Because without it, you're vulnerable. Now, here, that's the case, but in the West, it's got to the point where we need those things. But unfortunately, there's a want to take advantage of that want within us as humans, to want the what's best, to want the security for our families, for our loved ones, the safety. And that want in us is being manipulated and used to bring about the agendas of certain elitists on the planet. But I just always want to say to everybody, many people can be anti-big medicine. Many people can be you know what it's like. But the truth be told, even if you've got nothing to say good about Big Pharma, I watched a child's life be saved a few hours ago because we knew how to inject insulin into him. And we should always be grateful for the wonders that we have of modern medicine, and grateful for the infrastructure we have that does benefit us. And once we see that baseline infrastructure and what we're grateful for, then we can start working on creating the systems in the correct way to add to that. But don't let it get to a point where people are going to manipulate you into getting what they want. You know, here they are still focused on building those infrastructures, the hospitals, the schools, the ambulance service, the fire brigade. These things are not here. They still need to develop to there. In England, where all that stuff is developed, in the UK, in a general, where it's all developed, this is where you get to the point where humans start to want to develop things for their own interests, and society starts to get too comfortable and want to just get drunk and so on and so forth. And sometimes the problem I think I'm owning up to is we want to complain about something that we shouldn't complain about. I've got nothing good to say about the way our society is set up financially. Nothing good to say about the way our society is set up politically. But regardless of those two gargoyles controlling things, we've still ended up with some very beautiful benefits that we should always remember to stay grateful for. That's all I want to say in my tired rambling. Remember to be grateful. Just as we are. I wouldn't have had money in my pocket to pay for ICU if you guys weren't sharing with us. So I just ask that you join us in prayers for your Hannah, because he's really in a very bad way at the moment. He hasn't gained consciousness since around about 2 o'clock this morning, and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So God bless, guys.